Now, at the end of the day, I think myself, brothers and sisters, what we've got to look at is what our role is. Our role is a trade union. We're not a political party, and 95% of our members are in no political party whatsoever. And what they have is political views, and what they have is they pay a percentage of their union contributions into a political fund, which doesn't necessarily mean that the MPs or political parties get it. For example, 4 years ago, we had a campaign, Row Against Privatisation, where people marched, railway workers, from Glasgow in the north of our country, right the way down to London, going from city to city, exposing the myths and the disasters of privatisation. This Jay Walder sat on a board of Transport for London with me when he argued the case that there was nothing that could be done except for the infrastructure to be put into private hands. The private hands were the infrastructure would be run by private companies, and they would maintain the tracks and renew the tracks, and the trains that went over the top of them would stay in the public sector. That was the SOP. Of course, that wasn't the SOP. As soon as you privatise the infrastructure and you make a profit out of it, the next move along the line is to privatise the operating side as well. And as a result of that, we warned them that these companies would go bankrupt. And they did go bankrupt. Metronet, that represented and organised the infrastructure on 6 lines of London Underground, went to the wall and left the taxpayer with a 2.3 billion sterling bill, e.g. $4 billion US dollars. And Tube Lines give their contracts up 4 weeks ago. So all the infrastructure now on London Underground is now back in the public sector. Network Rail was a company that was a private company on the stock market that used to cut back on maintenance because, as people have said over the years, time is money. Time is profit. If you don't maintain the track to the same levels, then it means that you need less people to maintain the track, and the money goes into profits. And these private companies cut back on profits. They didn't actually go out and inspect the track properly. And a train at 110 miles per hour come off the track and went up onto a platform of a station and killed just under 20 people. And when they inspected the piece of rail, the argument was that the private company that was responsible for renewing it said that I'm not going to do it because I've got a contract problem with Railtrack, who was responsible for the overall safety. And Railtrack said they weren't going to implement getting another contractor in because they've already paid for this work to be done. And when they inspected the piece of track after the crash, this is the words of the inspector, it was like a broken biscuit broken into 100 pieces. And that train came off the track. Those people who died because the shareholders wanted a bigger dividend rather than the safety of the people that operated on the track and the passengers that went on it. And as a result of that, they went bankrupt. And there is a company called Network Rail, a private company, not for profit. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. A private company, not for profit. But however, it's a semi-private, semi-public company. So as a result of that, we're now seeing what these companies are doing. And if you look at the structure that's taking place now by these multinationals, because at the end of the day, what we've really got to look at as workers, we've got to start breaking out of saying, this don't affect my depot, or this don't affect my station, or this don't affect my company, or this don't affect my country. We have to recognise the fact there's a global assault taking place now on working people. And that global assault on working people is being brought about by this globalization. You know, globalization could be a fantastic thing. It could mean that you raise living standards for workers up right across the world, that you give them the best of everything. That our Nordic brothers and sisters, who probably get the best paying conditions, why can't we raise everyone's workers' paying conditions to what the Nordic workers get? Our members in Denmark and Australia would probably get the best annual leave and pensions. Why can't we raise everyone's level to that? Because if we raise everyone's level to the top, every single worker, then you haven't got to worry about competition, have you? Because you're all on the top. But it's not what it's all about on the top. What it's all about at the end of the day, you ain't got to be a genius or walk around with the New York Times or the Financial Times in your pockets. If you cut pay by 10%, it means that money goes across on the balance sheet to profits. And if you cut profits by 10%, it means that wages go up by 10% accordingly. And it's whoever's strongest at the depot at any given moment in time is top dog. If we're organised, then the employers can't get away with worse terms and conditions. And if we're disorganised, the employer comes in and attacks our terms and conditions and takes those hard-won gains off us. So therefore, brothers and sisters, I've got to give you a little message about a dispute that another union in our country, a sister union called Unite the Union, was involved with British Airways. And British Airways, the most profitable routes in the world are from North of Europe to America, North America, and North America back to Europe. They're the most profitable routes in the world. And what they said was, this is British Airways, who puts its Union Jack on every plane that we believe in Britain, said it wanted to set up a firm in France. It was going to be British Airways, but in France. And that's fine. That's a hub in France. But what they wanted was all the terms and conditions would be registered in France, and the pay of an airline pilot, an airline steward, would be 10% less in France than what they would in Britain. And therefore, workers coming onto the job will be working alongside each other, doing the same job for 10% less. Then what that really means at the end of the day is you're going to devalue the rate of pay for the job, and eventually when the majority of people on a lower rate of pay than the higher people, they will transfer everyone over from A to B. And as a result of that, the union balloted, and over 92% of people voted for strike action, in a ballot of over 85%, and it was declared illegal. Not declared illegal that there was irregularities in the ballot, not declared illegal they'd done anything wrong, but the judge turned around and said that this is disproportionate. If you go on strike, you'll do more harm to the economy than it would be just a normal industrial dispute, and he declared it illegal. He also said, as a request from the employers, that every single email and every single letter that a shop steward or a local representative wrote from the start of the dispute to the other had to be disclosed to the employer. Now you imagine some of the things that are written about people, can't you, a dispute? I mean, just imagine the things that's been written by Walder in the last 5 or 6 weeks. All those emails then went over to the employer, so the employer knew exactly who was saying what about every single employer in the country. That's what took place there. Now, the managing director of British Airways, again, an Irishman called Willie Walsh, which is a contradiction on itself, turned around and said that he was in Singapore and he was waiting for an airplane and a cleaner was sweeping up. Now, what's this kind of a story? He was sweeping up and he said to this cleaner, "Excuse me," he said, "how old are you?" And the cleaner said, "I'm 83. And he said, "Well, shouldn't you be retired?" And the Singapore cleaner says, "Well, I can't retire because I've got no pension. And if I retire, I literally have to go and die or sleep on the streets." Now, being a sort of person he would be, Walsh, you think he'd come back and say, "I'm going to make a statement about that Singapore cleaners and every other worker should get pensions and the same." He turned around and told the trade unions, "You need to get Asian." And when they said, "What do you mean get Asian?" He said, "I've just bumped into a Singapore cleaner, and if they can work to 83 years of age, there's no reason why that you can't work to 83 years of age as well." And that's what it boils down to, brothers and sisters. It's a race to the bottom. A race to the bottom. Half of the world work for $2 a day, and 10% of the world work for $1 a day. And they want to drive us from the top end of the scales down to the bottom.